So good morning again. I'm sorry to interrupt a discussion that seems somewhat paradoxical in what we describe as a network day, to stop people talking to each other and ask them to sit down in a more formal environment. But it is a network day, and I hope the discussion will continue throughout the day. My name is Maughan. I'm the chair of the Science Advisory Board of the European Hydration Institute. So it's my pleasure to welcome you formally to this, our first network meeting. And we set up these meetings as a way of bringing people together. We're all interested in hydration. We may have many other interests, but a common theme is that of hydration. And a common theme is that we mostly feel that hydration is underplayed and underserved. When we approach the major funding bodies, they say, yeah, we know it's a problem, but it's not a big problem. Go away, because we've got big problems to worry about. Most of us feel perhaps it's a rather bigger problem than many people would acknowledge. So it's a great pleasure to see you here. We have a busy day, we have an interesting day, but it is a networking day, and I hope that during the breaks there'll be a chance for everyone to talk. So please don't leave at the end of the day without having said hello to everyone else in the room. That should be your aim for the day, so we can follow things from here. We will have another network meeting in Madrid in October this year, but the aim is to try and grow a network of people interested in hydration and say, how can we raise the profile? How can we share our common aims and objectives over the years? So perhaps begin just by saying a little bit about the European Hydration Institute, and Jane Holdsworth, who is the managing director of the Institute, will say more about it later in the day. And it is an important public health issue, as well as important in many other arenas. My background is in exercise physiology, and hydration is crucially important in performance and sport. That's a nice environment to work in, because you can measure performance very acutely. You can measure the influence of hydration or inappropriate hydration very easily on performance. There are so many other arenas where hydration is also important, but where it's more difficult to measure the outcome of poor hydration. So there is a lack of public awareness. There's been a lack of investment in research in the area. And one of the knock-on effects is there's often been poor communication of the important messages to the general public, with consequences for poor behaviors. So the aim is to try and do something about it. We have some key questions we'd like to answer. And we start with a simple question. How much should we drink? How much is too little and how much is too much? Because both too little and too much can have harmful consequences. Are there health risks associated with inappropriate hydration? What are the acute effects of not drinking enough? What are the chronic effects of long-term dehydration? And what about performance? And we've thought mostly in the past about physical performance, but there are other aspects of performance: cognitive function, mood, and many occupational tasks which are crucially important. Talking to some airline pilots and some Royal Air Force pilots recently, they're in the habit of dehydrating before they fly. If you're in a fighter jet on a 6-hour mission, you haven't got anywhere to go to the toilet. If you're a pilot on an executive jet, the people paying large amounts of money for private hire don't want the captain walking through the cabin to use the executive toilet. These guys, it sounds, we all laugh, but speaking to these people, it's a significant issue. They're chronically dehydrated. Yet we know that dehydration can affect cognitive function. So when we see people making mistakes on the flight deck, we have to wonder whether some of those mistakes are a consequence. So it's not just performance in the sporting arena. There's a whole raft of performance issues we have to consider. And then we have to say, well, what about specific groups? Most of us are in a situation where we can comfortably maintain our hydration. But what about vulnerable groups, children and the elderly? And I'll touch briefly on that in just a minute. So if I start with a simple question, how much should I drink? How am I going to answer that? Well, today, of course, I asked Google, how much should I drink? And the top listed website is WaterAid UK. So I click on the top listed website, and it says, drink more water. Doesn't ask me any questions before it gives me that advice. Doesn't say, are you already drinking lots? Are you young? Are you healthy? Are you elderly? Are you sick? Have you got renal problems? It just says, drink more water. So I don't bother with the small print. I drink more water. But then on the way to this meeting, I pick up the Daily Telegraph, and it says, "Are you drinking too much water?" And it tells me people going to the gyms are drinking too much water and risking all sorts of serious consequences. So I'm confused. What should I do? How much should I drink? I don't know. So I go to EFSA. And EFSA, of course, has recently published some opinions on dietary reference values for water. And they tell me as an adult male, 2.5 litres a day is an adequate intake. So that's fine, 2.5 litres. That seems like a lot of water to drink in a day, doesn't it? Do I drink that amount? Well, I'll probably have a couple of cups of coffee and I'll have... No, I don't drink. But that's what I should be drinking, it tells me. But then I went last week to the States, so I better see what I should drink when I fly across the Atlantic, because it might not be the same. And indeed, it's not the same. So when I get on the plane, an adequate intake is 2.5 litres a day, but when I get off the plane, an adequate intake is 3.7 litres a day. Now, two expert bodies, the European Food Standards Agency and the Institute of Medicine in the US, yet one says 2.5 litres, which already seems a lot, and the other says 3.7 litres. But interestingly, it doesn't say, am I going to Denver in the summer, which I was, or am I going to Alaska in the winter? 3.7 litres, regardless. So, having gone to the experts, my confusion hasn't been much abated by what I've seen. So I have to ask, well, do the general recommendations apply to me? How do I know if I need more or less? And what are the consequences for me? Are there any if I don't drink enough? Are there any if I drink too much? And the answer, of course, depends on many different factors. Am I elderly or older? Am I young? Do I work in an air-conditioned office with a sedentary job and spend the evening sitting at home? Or do I have a physically demanding job, which involves being outside, working hard in all weathers? In my spare time, am I an athlete? Or does the limit of my physical activity extend to changing the television channel? Do I live in a cold climate? Do I live in a hot climate? There isn't one answer. And of course, people want answers. They want a single answer. So the EFSA recommendation is nice, 2.5 litres. The WaterAid UK is nice, drink more water. They're both very simple messages that are easy to understand. The reality is a little bit more complex. It says, maybe you need more, maybe you need less, depending. We're starting to see some interesting research addressing some of these issues, and this is a study on cognition in children, looking at giving some water at lunchtime and testing a range of assessments of cognitive function. And here, when children were given a drink at lunchtime, they performed better in a visual attention task, and they performed better in a short-term memory task, compared with not giving drinks. But when I speak to teachers in schools, they often say, no, we don't want the children to have drinks at lunchtime because they disrupt class by running to the toilet in the afternoon. So we've had the water fountains removed from school. Yet, surely we want our children to benefit from some of these effects. And I was talking to James Goodwin. In the older population, we see some issues. Clearly, dehydration is an issue for the older population, and it's recently hit the headlines with a number of deaths in the elderly in care homes that have been ascribed to inappropriate nutrition, inappropriate hydration. So at both ends of the age spectrum, there are some problems that are very specific to inappropriate hydration. And that's one of the reasons why the European Hydration Institute was established, to share knowledge, to share our concerns, and to share approaches to addressing some of those issues. So the reason it was established was to try and stimulate research, because there hasn't been a lot of research in many of these areas, and to provide a source of information. I'd encourage you all to look at the website and look at some of the information that's being provided. So we'll learn more about the EHI as we go through the day. But I just ask you to remember two key things: to stimulate research, and that's partly what we're doing today by bringing people with shared interest in research in this area together, and to provide an authoritative source of information. So we're looking to collect a consensus view on what the important issues are and what the shared messages should be. So what we've got today is we have in the morning some presentations, and two of those are the result of research reviews that were commissioned by the European Hydration Institute, one by Dr. Susan Sheriffs and one by Dr. Patrick Ritz. One is a piece of original research from Professor Maria Kapsakefalou from Greece. One of the things that the EHI did to try and stimulate research was to offer a small number of research grants to graduate students working in this area. Small amounts of money, but enough hopefully to stimulate some research and allow young people to do more than they could otherwise do with the research projects. So we're very pleased that those young scientists have come today to share those projects they're currently working on. We then have some original research presentations, and we'll finish with a brief description of what we're trying to achieve and how we go forward from this situation. So that's a very brief outline of the day.